cannot name the podcast, The Business of Theater. Art isn't easy, so stop making it hard to produce.
That's a little long. Work on it. If you pull it in a little bit, the second act needs work.
These are working titles, so
now,
they're not meant to be perfect. There's some truth in there, though.
here, now there's an advantage when I think about just what you said. The fact that art people in the arts are not government workers, therefore we're not all going to be laid off.
Yeah, well,
That's the only advantage right now.
true, but many artists are banking on key funding that they because they don't value, they are seeing as wasteful spending. And
And
so
may I, though,
that's
bring up just the only positive thing out of all this, in that it still comes down to a creative artist is a creative artist, and anything they do can can be considered art if it's of this good nature, if it
make it
has an
come
effect.
from you,
There
then
you
it will
go.
be new.
So the idea that the institutions that are putting it on stage are in trouble
Hmm.
does not tell the artists that they can't create.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that. If
Hmm.
anything, we have to double down.
Yeah.
But the problem is, of course, where do we double down when you have no money?
Hmm.
So that's the big question, I guess.
That's it. This is The Business of Theater, a working title. I'm Darnelle Radford,
I'm Mitch Weiss.
and let's get down to business. So, Mitch, it's been an interesting 2 weeks, but particularly for you, you just got back from vacation.
I was in Buenos Aires. Don't cry
Buenos
for me.
Aires.
Don't
Yes.
cry for me, Argentina. I did visit Evita's grave site.
Yeah.
It's a walking city,
Mm.
which is great when you come from New York. It's what you like to do, um, and it was considering it's winter here in New York. It was 99 degrees and humid in Buenos Aires, so that was a little change of pace.
Yeah.
But I did have an interesting perspective talking to some friends who live there. Um, there is a wonderful, gorgeous theater called the Teatro Colón, which is on the list of sightseeing things you should take a tour of. Um, the issue is that's it. There are a couple of other theaters, and basically, as far as American style large shows, I was told that there is a single director who does one big show a year that comes from Broadway. Um, he gets the rights to it. They put on a phenomenal production, and people think it's wonderful, including the expats who live there, who know
Mm.
what Broadway is like. And that's once a year. It's not even a season. Uh,
Mm.
when we were there were zero shows for us to go see, unless, certainly going to see a tango dance production could be wonderful,
Yeah.
but it's not the style of theater we've been talking about.
Mm.
So, having been there just a week, I was wondering what would I do if I lived there? Because I'm somebody who loves to go to the theater.
Yeah.
Where would I go? What would I do?
I
Have you ever
wonder.
thought about that?
Yeah. I wonder for you, since you are a traveler, that you would seek it out where it is,
Hmm.
and perhaps living in a space that is arguably void of theater, or just doesn't have is not as bountiful as New York. It might just adjust your life in a way that you didn't expect, but also for the better.
How so for the better? Go ahead,
So,
convince me.
for example, think about the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we were all like just busy, just on the go, 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 go. And then as soon as we were forced to slow down, it was a hard time ramping back up to that pace, because we had experienced a new normal.
Mm.
And so, there's probably so much about Buenos Aires um, that now that it's commonplace for you, it would fill in those spaces. Like, it's like you walk to your favorite, I don't know, you walk to your favorite deli in New York, but you don't do that in Buenos Aires. Instead, you go to a coffee shop, you get your coffee, and you go for a walk down this beautiful street that you saw when you visited, and now that's kind of your routine. You
Oh,
know,
if you're saying I would adjust, of course. If you
yeah,
send me to the middle of Indiana
yeah.
and there's, a high school theater and that's it, I adjust.
I'm a high
But,
school theater bitch now.
but the question, speak for yourself. And my name is Mitch, not Bitch. Thank you. Uh,
The
but
intertwine.
why? But the issue being is how does that, you know, how does that make any of our lives? We talk about how enriching the arts are
Hmm.
for all of us. And when you grow up without it, then I understand you get used to that. But certainly, if you have access to it, you could get a lot from it. If you're used to this, to then choose to live without it
Mm.
seems to me like you're saying, I'm retired. I'm
Well,
now going to play golf every day.
but I don't think you would live without it. I think it just wouldn't be as readily available for you, but you would still find it. And since you are already a traveler, I think you would look for it in your opportunities to travel.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I didn't go to Buenos Aires researching how much theater I could see.
Mhm.
But I was surprised that while I was there, I didn't have some choices
Yeah.
that we spend one night. Maybe there's because I can speak some Spanish. Let's go see a production in Spanish. Maybe it would have tango, maybe not. I didn't really care. There
Mhm.
was nothing except a tango show for tourists for me
Yeah.
to go see. And by the way, which is actually wonderful, there was a lot of free tango and free music on the streets.
Oh, awesome.
And so, we go down by the waterfront. There were just street performers all the time dancing and doing really wonderful stuff. So that's exciting. And then you go, gee, now it's evening. And they eat very late. So you certainly could go out to dinner after seeing the show and at night because people don't even start to eat until 9 p.m.
Yeah.
So all of that made sense to me. And then you hit that 6 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. period, and there was nothing to choose.
Hmm.
I mean, while we were there, Teatro Colón was under repair, so there
Hmm.
was no show there. That would have been one place.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
and
like, it's funny as you said that. I was thinking about that movie, The Majestic, that starred Jim Carrey. He moved to this town that didn't have a movie theater or something, or it was run down or whatever, and then that became his focus. I wonder. I don't know. Given your
yes, I would start my own theater company.
okay, yes, and that's what I was going to say. Maybe that's what you would do. This place needs theater, and so you would create it.
Well, the question would be, does it need it? You know,
Yeah, I
there
know
are
you.
there are 15 million people in Buenos Aires. If
Wow.
they've been living this long without theater,
Hmm.
just not that they couldn't
Yeah.
adjust, but I really wonder.
And would they want foreign theater or theater that resonates with them? And yeah, so you would have to. Oh well, just kind of like I said this weekend as we were moving. Perhaps you live with your new space for a bit before you think about what it needs.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You would have
Yeah.
to know it better. But when I was in Madrid many years ago, um, I remember while I was there, I saw three or four La Dama del Alba. We saw Yerma. All these plays by Pulitzer Prize winning or award winning Spanish playwrights that were totally in Spanish, and some of them were very experimental.
Mm.
And I couldn't understand it. All my Spanish isn't that great, but the theatrical experience was wonderful. I
Yeah.
was kind of expecting that.
I was thinking about how a lot of my friends who are were here in Philadelphia moved to New York, and they are very much in tune with what's going on in Philadelphia still.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of that too. Like, you would still be connected to New York City no matter what.
Oh, there's no question. It's the
Yeah,
reason
because you have
I
friends
can't
and
move.
family, and yeah, and then I think your friends and your friends will come and visit you more, and they will bring all the juicy details of like what's
I,
going on and
I
so
do
on.
not want I do not want friends to visit me. Get your own hotel room.
They're like, we
I'm
were
not.
planning, we were so planning to come visit you
Yeah,
though.
yeah, yeah.
Now we know Mitch doesn't want anybody to come, so we're not coming.
Anyway,
But it is interesting to think about because and while this might be sort of hyperbolic, like, President Biden used to say, it's not hyperbole, folks. But the way things are going with the current administration, they are trimming what they believe is fat. They don't understand why our government is what it is and why it's the size that it is, and so they're making adjustments that are compromising the arts in the country. And it does make you think, like, what would we do without the arts? And we often have this conversation amongst ourselves, but it's almost like, being a member of the LGBTQ community. Once you're amongst your people, it does feel like we're the only ones who are there, but we are a very small fraction of the overall, population. And the same thing with the arts community. And so maybe it's easy for people who don't value the arts to look at it and say, this is not like this impact is not justified. We're not reaching as many people as the federal government should to justify this expense. But the part of it that kind of frustrates me is that it's sort of it's sort of the opposite of things. Usually you're trying to tackle this big thing that's going to make an impact, and then all the little things are going to sort of fall in line. But in this case, I feel like the government has the ability to say there is a tiny subset of our population who needs extra support, and this is something we can do because it's a small group of people. It's a small subset of our society. It's not, if it was everyone, we would need some broader partnerships, strategic planning. But if this is just a smaller group and we can just allocate some funds, we should do that.
well, and it's also a small amount of money. You
Yes.
know, for for a nonprofit to get $10,000
Hmm.
can be life saving.
Yes.
And when you put together all of the $10,000, it doesn't even come to a point zero zero
Hmm.
percent of
Yeah.
our of a budget.
Hmm.
But uh, the overreaction, it's like we still need scapegoats,
Yeah,
right?
that I also heard that about how they're cutting like administrative staff and so on, and like the federal the federal government's employment like allocation is like 3% of the budget.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even.
And be honest with you, I think we all have. I don't know anybody
Mhm.
who doesn't say we want to spend less government money as long as what we are supporting works. You
Mm.
want if you're going to clean, if you're going to pick up garbage, whatever it costs to make sure the streets are clean is what you have to allocate. You don't want to allocate a dollar more, so
Mhm.
you're always looking for that fine balance. Well, the arts, as we learned during the pandemic, the world can survive without them. We
Mm.
can shut theater down. The
Yeah.
question is that the world we want to live in,
Mm.
especially when it's not a lot of money? PBS television has always been government supported. I am expecting, I hope this is not true, that this administration will do everything it can to shut them down, uh, which, for those of us who like what's on that channel, there's a reason they exist.
Hmm.
But if we only go with how many people are watching, right, we're in trouble. We don't need most of our cable TV shows either. They have very few audiences.
Yeah,
This has been our argument. You know,
and
we had
they are they get subsidies as well.
absolutely. Well, so does oil, so does
Mhm.
gas, oil and gas, so does the farm community, so does Tesla get a subsidy, so does, I mean,
Oh, and the five
the,
other companies he owns.
the government, the pharmaceutical companies get subsidies. There are lots of reasons, some of which are bad. There are lots of reasons why the government decides to subsidize, and the problem is we don't know what they are. So my issue is, as a someone who does budgets all the time, I want to cut as much as can be cut, but you don't do it indiscriminately.
Yeah,
And that's what I'm fearful of. If there are theater companies that do not deserve to be funded, bless them. Let's find the ones who do and give them more.
yeah, and
Or, but right now you're just saying, oh, here are a bunch of good ones. We're taking their money away too.
hmm, yeah, and I just don't understand the Kennedy Center though. You know,
Oh, I do. I do.
the president the
I
president
get.
couldn't hold a candle to any of the values that that JFK
Now,
carried.
now, 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 we're staying out of politics out of
No,
personal
I'm
politics.
saying it is clear that he would not agree
Yeah,
with
but
anything
it's
that
not
the
about him.
namesake does. I know,
It's
but
not about him.
also if you've never even seen a show here and you don't I mean, does he understand what a chairman does?
No.
Because a chairman is is a fundraiser, cheerleader, the ultimate cheerleader for the organization, and they need to be able to go into rooms and encourage other people to get on board. And
Well,
I don't
here,
know, like, first of all, how do you have the time as a president? Like, if you wonder why there was no other president serving on the board of the Kennedy Center, it's because let's be realistic about, like, I have this conversation many times. There's there's stuff you really need to do, and then there's stuff that would be nice to do, but you have to realize which of those is a priority and which of those is just you know, something you want to waste time and space doing. Like there's already a capable chairman, at the Kennedy Center, at least for another year. There's already a capable president who is supposed to be there for at least another year as well. And so this choice causes those very powerful leaders to just walk away from this organization.
right. And not only that, the artists are now starting to cancel their uh, concerts and their shows
Yeah.
there in protest. Which I have a problem. Is always the issue about do do we bombard the place with shows that ought to be there, or do we walk away from it because we're being told this one person doesn't want our show there?
Hmm.
Which way is the better protest? I do not have an answer.
No.
I do. I stay away from protesting online, um, basically, but I can agree with 99% of everything I read. Um, at the same point, I don't understand, other than he's ruling by being a bully.
Yeah.
It's the bully. Here's the new phrase, the bully pulpit, right? It has a whole new meaning. I
Yeah.
now make decisions by bullying the organizations I can put myself in control of.
Yeah.
And at some point, we'll see where it backfires. Um, for most of us, it already has.
Yeah.
You know,
I
my understanding, by the way, the Kennedy Center, the only thing he did immediately was make sure that a show that had a theme about trans people was not allowed, and had drag queens. That's it. There
Mm.
was a show with drag queens that was due, one show the whole year that was due to show up at the Kennedy Center. He canceled it.
Mm.
That to me seems to be the main reason he wanted to get involved. And
Ridiculous.
we're
If you
here,
don't like the art, don't go. Don't go.
and
Just
as I've seen 100 people say, or heard 100 people say, which is the right thing, there has never been a good person associated with banning books,
mhm.
banning plays, banning art. Right? It's like it doesn't work.
Yeah.
That it does not make you good. And we have a society that grows because of our artists, and we can't be stagnant. It's one thing if you have quote unquote old fashioned beliefs, and that's fine. You know, I understand you don't want to take your child to something you disagree with. So that's about communicating clearly about what you're going to see.
Yeah.
And then for the rest of us who want to be challenged and want to say, I didn't think about that, or I've never wanted to see that, but that was interesting, or I hated that. Those of
Mm.
us who do want to be that kind of challenge, why are you taking that away from us?
Yeah. I saw earlier today, and the thing I love about doing this podcast is that the people who know us, they communicate with us, and
Mm-hmm.
so often I will get text messages in the middle of our conversations. And so the one I got a few minutes ago was an earlier post from Broadway World that said a darkened marquee couldn't stop
Yeah.
uh, Mincemeat's glowing Broadway debut, although the marquee had to remain unlit as the specialty light bulbs required have been held up due to a delay related to Donald Trump's recently enacted tariffs. The musical received a 5-minute standing ovation during its first preview. And it,
Good. That's a
yeah,
good press agent
I know.
because nobody really cares about your marquee lights, and they
I
turn this
know.
into a giant
Yep.
political thing,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. I know it is. There's tons of people posting
Yeah.
down. Somebody's like, no eggs, no lights. Oh man, it's just yeah. And the thing is, it's that's why they keep saying cruelty is the point, and I just don't understand how that's a winning strategy. It's
Well,
like
nobody said it's going to win,
no.
but at the on the other hand, I have been very tired through most of my life hearing people tell me about all the fraud and corruption in the government, which I have no argument with.
Mhm.
I know it's there, and
Yeah.
in fact, even it's there in theater, and it's there in music, and it's certainly in music. It's there.
Hmm.
It's all over the place. It's in the oil business. That is part of human nature. Now, what are we going to do to fix it? Just rip it all to shreds?
And see, I think this is what a lot of people resonate with, this mindset of just tearing it all down because it's not working. And the thing is, you know, if you're barely paying attention, yeah, the whole entire system is broken.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not paying attention, you know, but the thing is, like, it's just like anything, I'm sure there's something you really hoped happened at your job, and instead something else happened that was good but wasn't exactly what you wanted, and this is the way the world works. I just
That's
don't
it.
understand. It's like if you're barely paying attention, how are you so outraged by these things? Like over the years, I've just had a lot of friends who would say, or just people, acquaintances, people in my orbit, who would generally say something to the effect of like, "Oh, neither party is doing anything right," or whatever. Like that's just such a blanket statement to attach to everybody. Like there's obviously something that resonates, and um
Well,
you're just not interested enough to even make those valid points.
it's being discerning. It's about to analyze enough. I mean, we can't all be experts in everything,
Hmm.
right? But the what we ought to have taught, and I think some of us had got that education in school, some of us obviously did not.
Hmm.
You're supposed to be able to analyze what is a bunch of bull, what is very general, and what is just your own personal prejudice based on some fear or something you heard somebody say.
Yeah.
And you're just not supposed to accept it. We're here on a podcast, and I'm going, my understanding in my industry is there are people I would trust with anything. I know them well enough that they would never do anything to harm their show, the people around them. They mistakes are made, but they would put 120% into everything, and they
Mm.
wouldn't steal a dime. They would feel guilty about taking a pen from their office.
Mm.
And then there are other people I can't say that about. So I would like to, the people who I trust on that level, you want to say, go for it. Let's be that kind of discerning. Let's know who we can trust. I'm still waiting to figure out who currently, if anybody, I can trust. I don't see it, right? There used to be people that were going, I know he's not or she is not doing the policy I would agree with. I know this artistic director of a theater company is not doing what I think is the right thing with their money in that
Mm.
company. But I also know that this person who may not have as much money is doing everything they can to turn out the best theater with the least amount of money, making just enough to make a living. That person deserves some money in support.
Yeah.
And that, so if you just erase support of the arts, you're hurting them and they're barely making any money anyway.
You know what I've been thinking about? Like our savvy in theater. Um, we have the ability to make it work with shoestrings and gum.
Yes. And we do.
And we do. And I think because they know that we do that, that they keep testing us to see if we can and do. And so it's weird because we are resilient and it's kind of to our downfall.
Well, okay, but here's it's not an argument.
Yeah.
That's also the argument they make against being unionized in the arts.
Mm.
Because the difference is we also know we love what we do so much that we're willing to do it for free.
Mm.
And that has always been true. We will, when possible, and we all have to pay rent or eat, but when possible, maybe we take a job we don't like and then we do the theater for free,
Hmm.
right? Or music. So they know that. That doesn't mean you're not entitled to a living wage.
Yes,
And that's where
absolutely.
the Broadway and off Broadway unions come in. They said, you know what? We are entitled to make something. Now,
Hmm.
how much that is always negotiable.
Yeah.
But if I look at some of the theater companies around the country, they literally are making nothing. And if you come to New York, at least you know for the time being that you're on a show, you're making a living wage.
Yeah. I always I always I always talk about how sometimes I am very frustrated with Actors Equity Association just in terms of like reporting. You know, sometimes I'll send a report and they have a question about it 3 months later. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, where were you when I sent that, on time? And now you're asking me questions. But at the same time, even though that frustrates me, I understand that they are in support of the artists, and so am I. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with that frustration because all they're trying to do is right by the artists. And so am I. And
Well, except you're talking now about an organization,
yeah.
and within the organization, and I'm talking about past people. For example, 20 years ago, um, our show had a run-in with someone in the pension and welfare department
Mhm.
because they had taken 5 months to determine that a show that had closed owed $22. Now the
We
show is closed, and they're coming after the
yeah.
show. I mean, we paid it. We figured we know how to do that, but it's like 5.5 months.
Yeah.
Your job is also to to do your job well. It ended
Mhm.
up that person, that individual, was a slacker and didn't
Mm.
care about her job.
Oh,
It had nothing to do with the organization. It wasn't about her boss or somebody, some organization that needed to be slashed. The
mhm.
wrong person was in the wrong job. So that happens,
Yeah.
this is what isn't happening right now. Maybe it will. I don't see how slashing everything uh, challenges us. All it
No.
does is hurt us. And since we are the ones also paying taxes,
Yeah.
you know, and everyone's got their own area of interest. If you're a farmer, I know some farmers in Wisconsin, they are suffering.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to be interested to see what gets sliced from their budgets.
Yeah. And I think about, we have to find other ways. We have to find a way to be less dependent on this funding, but also we need to make clear in the argument, if we could, we would. Like we don't, if we could do it without having to go through all these hoops, we would.
Well, by the way, it goes back to Buenos Aires. I
Mhm.
bumped into a friend who lives here in New York in Buenos Aires, and she works for a major philanthropy that funds not theater but a certain portion of the arts. And she and her family, we got in a big, heavy discussion about what's wrong with philanthropy and nonprofits.
Mm.
And the idea was, and it was fascinating to hear coming out of other people's mouths, is well, ideally, we shouldn't have nonprofits begging for money.
Mm.
We should just, as happens on Broadway, you just pay for the price of the ticket needed for the show to pay its expenses. Of
Mm.
course, that's why Broadway costs $350.
Yeah.
And then, therefore, it's not accessible to the general public, especially if you live in Idaho or Indiana or Florida and you're retired. So, how do we balance that if everything is going to be purely commercial?
Yeah, and that's
Uh,
and
but
that's
maybe
what it.
that's the answer. Maybe we just go, there's no nonprofit theater anymore. You're not going to get any arts unless you pay $150 to see something in your community that you can go to the movies for $18 or you can watch on TV for free.
So I wonder that now too. I'm like, yeah, uh we need this support because we're trying to make art as accessible as possible. Like
Mm-hmm.
some of the organizations are like, we'll eat these fees, to make sure that you're paying what we think is a fair wage, I mean, a rate for you to come join us in the conversation. And sometimes, yeah, I'm sure the people who manage the money, like myself included, are just like, we got to make money though. We can't. I'm not even talking about like we need a new. We would never buy a Tesla as a
Yeah.
company car, but it's that we have to be realistic of what our actual expenses are. And there are some companies who are savvy enough to say, here's how much our ticket should cost if it were going to, you know, pay all of our expenses. Like if it
Right.
was going to cover the cost of doing business. Like this ticket would be $85, but instead they will offer you several pay what you decide options
Mm-hmm.
so that you pay at the level you think that you can do. And I think what works about that is that somebody who thought this place was elitist, who thought they didn't have a way in, finds out that they actually have a price point that's right for them. And so they take advantage of that price point and they get to be in the room where it happens.
Now, though, here's another argument with that. certainly when you get Hamilton or Wicked
Mm-hmm.
or Lion King, people who have no money will find a way to spend $225 on a seat,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
When it is that important to them. Now, what they don't realize and what the general public doesn't realize is we must, as they say, kiss a lot of frogs in order to get a prince. So the money that is being subsidized by nonprofits and by developmental companies are the frogs.
Mm-hmm.
Hamilton, Wicked, Lion King, they all come out of development. They didn't know just
Sondheim.
by Simon, they didn't
Sondheim's
Sweeney
the frogs.
Sweeney Todd, yeah, Sweeney Todd about a guy who slits the throats of people he's shaving.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, how would that ever be? You read the script and you go, "Oh yeah, I'm going to make $100 million off of this."
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't know that. You have to try it out, and that's the experimental level, and that's the smaller level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what needs to be funded. We don't need to fund Wicked. We don't need to fund Hamilton because they've already gone through that cheaper process and then they were successful beyond belief.
Yeah.
Of course, they had, because they're commercial theater, they had investors willing to take the risk. Okay, we'll pay $250,000 to see a small little workshop of this to see if it's even good enough for us to move on. They
Mm-hmm.
have that money. Well, for that to happen on a mass scale, the government or philanthropies have to fund that.
Yeah.
Right? You can't. Yeah, we've done shows. You and I have talked about this. We've done shows for $3,000. We can find a way to do it. But at some point, you got to spend more than 3,000 to get it to the next level, and then it's 15,000, and then it's 50,000, and somewhere that money has to be available. And since there aren't philanthropists who have or investors who want to throw that money at most theaters, we have to rely on grants and on goodwill and the government to some extent.
Yeah.
And that's my argument, even though as you know, I'm a commercial guy. I believe that we should do as much as we can um, with money that isn't begged for,
Yeah.
right? That we need angels. We need people who just say the arts are worth it. I'm going to take a risk. One of these shows that I'm putting money into will be a hit to give me back my money. Instead of here's my money, I get a tax deduction and I'll never see you again.
Mm.
Right? That I don't like. That's me personally. I don't like that.
So let's take the the risk taking nature of a good portion of nonprofit theaters,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, do you think do you think those organizations have to change what they produce to okay, so sometimes we think about like, oh, we'll do this show because it's a draw, like it'll be a box office hit. Um, but the risk the shows that are risky, like the news shows, are the ones that you kind of do have to coax people to come to because they don't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to introduce this to the world, and you want as many people to see it, and you may even go as far as to say the themes in this piece resonate with a population that doesn't frequent our theater. We're trying to reach them, to be part of this conversation as well. Do you think, if they're really relying on this funding that's being cut in order to do that, would they have to change what they want to present to the community?
My answer to that, this is my personal answer,
Hmm.
is they better not. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying the need for money. Look, theater companies are not a God-given right
Hmm.
to us. If they close, if they go under, so be it. Somebody else in the theater will open a new one. The trick to me is, why are you doing it? Most people who start their own theater company, and I'm now being a little facetious, so you're going to give me a little latitude here. Most of them are saying, I couldn't get hired to do this, so I'm going to do it myself.
Mm.
And this is what
Okay.
I want to do. This is my personal taste. They're not interested in making their mark on culture. They don't care if there's a giant audience. They're not necessarily looking to become Hamilton or a chorus line or Cats. They are just doing what makes themselves happy. And then to me it's questionable whether they should be getting public money.
Hmm.
However, at some point people start developing a reason to be doing culture, to be experimenting, to be trying things, to be working with other artists, and um, both kinds, by the way, even the selfish kinds doing it for their own purpose. It's the only way we get to the impactful shows. Someone has to take a risk,
Mm.
and if nobody shows up, the show should still go on. If nothing else, the cast will bring in their family. The thing is, what we all have to do is say, what if I take a risk and there aren't 12 performances worth of audience to come? Well, why
Mm.
can't we do it and only have one performance and consider that worthwhile? Why
Hmm.
are we doing this? That's to me the experimental developmental thing.
True.
Um, okay, but again, I don't see many people thinking this. Then you look at a Guthrie or an Actors Theater of Louisville or a La Jolla, and they're experimenting all the time because they have an audience that says, more
Hmm.
times than not, when I've come here,
Yeah.
the experiment was worthwhile.
I've been along for the ride. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, but that takes time.
Yeah.
None of them started as major theater companies. So you have to have a vision and you have to just give it a try. And if it fails, we were talking about this earlier, Darnell, you and I. Failing isn't failing in the arts,
No. Failing is
right?
lessons learned. That's why we have postmortems.
That's it.
What worked?
And
What didn't? How can we be better next time?
should we do it again and repair it, or
Hmm.
should we let that one die?
Yeah.
And it's part of the unique process. Pharmaceuticals, I hate to make the comparison. I imagine with all the money they spend on research, how many drugs have they tried that don't work? They don't say, oh my God, we failed. We're never going to try to find another drug.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
but what they do is they charge $1 billion for the drugs that work. So and they get some subsidies from the government.
yeah.
So I don't know. What do we do in the arts?
I was going to say like I think the reason we can't just do like a short run of something is 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 in a way because of the unions. The way the union is set up, it does make sense for us. We've already paid the artists for the week. We should maximize the week. I feel like that is kind of the thought process, to stay within the hours because once they're in performance mode, it's a few hours a day as opposed to rehearsal, you know, and so I think that's part of it, and also I realize that there are these conversations being had with the funders, and basically you kind of have to lie to the funders in order for them to believe in you, uh, or at least craft a well-told tale,
Yeah.
for them to believe that if they give you the funding that you will do you would do magical things with it. Even though every organization who's reaching out to them is struggling, you're going to be the unicorn in this, and our investment is going to be so worthwhile if we go with you. And I think it's very similar to, um, oh, this grant calls for this. We can weave that in to qualify for this grant instead of just being realistic about what we have to offer.
Well, that's the argument against. This is my argument.
Hmm.
To be very clear, against the nonprofit system.
Yeah.
When you're begging for money, you are at the whim of the person you're begging from.
Hmm.
And in some cases, if they're personal donors, then often they're the ones who are going to dictate what kind of theater you do because you want to please them because you need their money.
Hmm.
Therefore, you're no longer taking the same risks.
Yeah.
Same thing, you go for these foundation grants or any philanthropist, and they say, and there's an example here in New York right now of a theater company that is only doing plays that have to do with um, I'm trying to make sure I use the right phrase. Uh, the arts and not the art, the IT and anything that has to do with computers and science and
Mm.
anything about that. But that they will fund almost the entire year as long as every play has that as a theme.
Has like STEM or STEAM elements?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, thank you. That actually, I think that is the phrase.
Yeah.
And this theater company has all these plays they want to do, but
Mm.
since they don't fit that category,
Yeah.
they cannot do them because they
Hmm.
can only afford to do the plays and they have to go look for other plays that they weren't planning to do.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily good. So the idea that we're not just funding artists, that we're not funding creative people to do the best they can. I cannot tell you how many readings and workshops I've gone to in New York. Very lucky. New York is bombarded with things to go to see. That these shows blew me away, and yet I couldn't think of a theater company that would take it because the topic didn't fit their taste.
Mm.
But I sat there going, this is one of the most original, well done, well written pieces. And I've written to the playwrights in each case. And I said, I wish I could help you. I don't know what to do. Have you found a theater company? Have you found a producer? And, it was one of those things where at the end of the reading, the audience has a talk back, and people raised their hand and said, I wouldn't change a single word. It was that good. And
Mm.
that play is now 15 years old and has never been done.
Mm.
And I'm still in contact with that playwright. And I'm still looking for a place to do it. But I don't know anybody who will. His topic was too interesting. And it doesn't fit what nonprofits have to put on.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
And that's why I said art isn't easy. So stop making it
Ah,
hard to produce.
who,
There's always something. It's either internal or external. We're just making it hard to produce art.
right, we are.
And yeah, so it's coming at us all ways. And I think instead of panicking, we have to gather and plan. Like we have to think about, okay, if this funding falls out, like what do we do? Like how we're not dead in the water. This is just a path we can't follow anymore. And so it's like, who moved my cheese? This cheese is gone, and now
Yeah.
we have to find new cheese. And so we're not having that conversation. We're just going, I hope they don't lose it,
Mhm.
because we need it. Instead of saying it's under threat, let's go figure out another pipeline. Yeah, it's
And there are people smarter and more um, involved with money
mhm.
who should be having this discussion with us.
Yeah.
They're not at the table. That we don't know how to get them to think that this needs to be changed.
Yes.
That's the problem. They're just saying, well, we just do what we do. And what do you mean you can't afford to show me the entire show up front?
Yeah. HALP. Help. Okay, we're out of time. We have asked more questions than we have answered,
Yep.
and that is really the business. It is the business of theater is rhetorical. that's that's basically our working title.
Yeah.
But yes, so that is the business of theater. A working title. I'm Darnell Radford,
I'm Mitch Weiss.
and we'll see you at the theater?
We sure hope so.
Question mark. All right. Good chat. Good
Yeah.
chat.